I would like to thank our speaker this year, Honorable Branko Terzic, who is going to be our Vidovdan speaker for the year 2024. And I am especially pleased because today I have an easy task to introduce someone who needs no introduction. And we all know Archie Branko, who is one of the highest Serbs appointed and confirmed by the US Senate into the government service of this country. But at the same time, he's one of the most renowned Serbs of America, in the sense that people both in Europe and here know him as one of the great patriots, one of the great lovers of Serbian history, and an expert in things Serbian. He also happens to be, in a sense, an extended member of the royal household of Serbia, in the sense that he is kum with his Highness Crown Prince Alexander and his family. And Chika Branko is also the royal adjutant. And he also holds a number of the highest of Serbian decorations, royal decorations. So we are grateful to God that He has given him as a gift to this parish in our community, and that he is one of us. But we are also grateful to his expertise in the Serbian history, which he kindly accepted to share with us today. Today he will speak on the Battle of Kosovo, and as an expert in things heraldic, of course, history of the Serbia and medieval Serbia and everything that has to do with medieval Serbian history, we look forward to this lecture. Chika Branko, thank you so much, and we look forward to hearing you speak on this important topic.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I am not a historian. I'm not an expert in Serbian literature. I don't know the Narodna Pesme by heart. I do know some of them. But in my 70-some years living in exile, I was born outside of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. That's where my parents were from. When they left the country in 1945, it was the Kingdom of Yugoslavia. Unfortunately, in '46, it became a Soviet Socialist Republic, but they left the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and living in exile, I always had this yearning to know, what was it they left? What was that country about? Where were my ancestors from? I grew up without any contact with my family in Yugoslavia because we were anti-communists, and contacting them would be bad for them. Yugoslavia was a police state. Neighbors reported on neighbors. There was a neighborhood watch. If you had a visitor from the West, that had to be reported to the police. Many naive American tourists would go to Yugoslavia and think it's a paradise. You know, everybody's happy and whatever, not understanding they were visiting in a police state. So my curiosity was so much greater because all of that was denied me. And I would ask my father, Dusan, I'd say, tell me about the old country. He says, what do you want to know about that? We came to America. This is a modern country. Who cares about our history? Well, I cared, because it was taken from me. And so I spent, from my earliest youth, even as an engineering student, I would take time to read about and learn about and talk to people about Serbian history. So let's go back even before Serbian history to the Roman Empire. In 330 AD, the great Constantine moved the Roman Empire from Rome to a new city of Constantinople near an old town called Byzantium. And for generations, this was called the Roman Empire. The languages were Latin and Greek. And the Roman Empire at the time of Constantine was the entire Mediterranean. And that was in 330 AD. So in the next 900 years, that Roman Empire shrunk. What about the Serbs? Well, the earliest reported mention of the Serbs is in Greek and some Roman text, that the white Serbs entered the lands of the Roman Empire given by the Emperor Heraclius in 610. So 300 years after Constantine moves the headquarters of the Roman Empire to Constantinople, just north of him, his successor, Heraclius, gives the Serbs coming from the Carpathians the lands around the Ras River, which also led to them being called Rasians, Rascia, R-A-S-C-I-A. And we had early kings. These are all reported over the centuries. The Serbian people had their kings. But as the Serbian kingdoms developed, the empire, the Roman Empire, declined. In the year 1204, the Christians from the west, the Franks, the Germans, the Italians, sacked and destroyed the city of Constantinople. They stripped it of its treasures. If you want to see the great treasures of the Byzantine Empire today, you go to Venice, or you go to Genoa, or you go to Rome, because they were stolen and taken by the Christian Crusaders. And that sack weakened the Byzantine Empire, which allowed neighboring groups to the south, the Sultanate of Rum and the Ottoman Turks, to gain influence. Because if you weaken Byzantium, if you weaken the Roman Empire of the East, you allowed these tribes to come up. In 2001, Pope John Paul II apologized. And he said, "It is tragic that the assailants who set out to secure free access for Christians to the Holy Land turned against their brothers in faith. The fact that they were Latin Christians fills Catholics with deep regret." Well, it fills him with deep regret. I don't know if all Catholics feel the same way, but in any event, we'll take him for his word. So now we have the time of the sack of the empire, sack of Constantinople. So we have the Byzantine Empire destroyed by Christian crusaders. Later, the Christian crusaders would leave, and other Byzantine lords would come in. But at the same time, we had the Serbian Empire is growing, and so we've got a series. Here we've got the sack of after the sack of Constantinople, the Serbian Empire grew. In 1217, we had the crowning of Stefan Nemanja. In 1219, Serbia under Saint Sava, as its bishop, became an independent Orthodox church. We had a series of other kings, culminating in the year 1346 with the crowning of Stefan Dusan. Now, Stefan is not a name. Stefan is a title. It means crowned, okay? So the crowning, this is crowned by the church. So Stefan was the title. Later, the Grimm brothers, when they were stealing the folk tales and folk legends of the Serbian people. Here's a Serbian fairy tales by Elodi Mijatovic in 1914. As the Grimm brothers and others stole the Serbian fairy tales, they thought Stefan was a name. So you have King Stefan here and King Stefan there, but they don't give his full name because they didn't realize Stefan wasn't his name. So we have that. So we've got Stefan Dusan now coming in the year 1346. This is what the arms of the Kingdom of Serbia looked like. The white eagle was predominant at that time. The four fire steels came later, what we call the four C's. Here is an artistic representation of the crown, or the coronation of Dusan. And if you research this particular painting, you will be told that there are within it other historic personages. Even in this one, Miloš Obilić is said to be depicted. So this 19th century artist added historic Serbian figures, bishops and saints and others into this picture. And this might even be Saint Sava here. But so we've always depicted our history that way. So the year that Stefan Dusan Silni, Dusan the Mighty, also translated by some of the Englishmen as Dusan the Magnificent. What would the empire look like? See, the Byzantine Empire now had shrunk to just this little piece of what's now Greece and Bulgaria. The Ottoman Turks were expanding. They were starting here. The Seljuks and others were down here, the Mamelukes. And here we had Serbia, now at that time called Servia in some of the old, but you can see Serbia takes up much of what is Greece, Albania, and modern Serbia today. So that was the kingdom as it existed when Dusan died on his way to conquering Constantinople. And had he have not died, I believe it's from malaria, very likely the entire course of Western history would have changed. But he did die on the way to to conquer the Byzantines. And what did he leave behind? Well, he was too young to have left a strong successor. Here is the Empire of Dushan in another map, seeing it goes all the way down into Greece. Huge Empire of Serbia, the Empire of Serbia, with its slightly different colored coat of arms. So Dushan dies, and his large empire falls apart into small regional kingdoms. And we have here Lazar Hrebljanovich, known to us as Tsar Lazar, the Brankoviches, Vuk Brankovic, known to us, the Dejanoviches, Oliver Ginčić, Simeon Uroš, the Dragashes are in there somewhere as well. And these are Petar Losha, who this is now Albanian portion. The Balcic brothers, who were originally Frankish knights. Balzius, who came in with the Crusades, left a dynasty in Zeta, what is now Montenegro. Balzius went to Balcic. Vojinović is here, Altoman, and then up here to Bosna under Kralj Tvrtko. And so rather than having one large unified kingdom, we have a series of small principalities after Dushan, the largest of which, but not that large, is that of Prince Knez, of Knez Lazar. So the Ottomans now are starting to expand into the Balkans. In 1379, they fight a battle at Maritsa. By this time, Marko Kraljević, whose lands are down in the southeastern portion, has already become a vassal of the Turks, and he is fighting alongside the Turks. Thrace and Macedonia fall to the Ottomans. Sofia, Bulgaria falls to the Ottomans. There is a victory in 1386-87 at the Battle of Plochnik, where Knez Lazar defeats an army of about 10,000 Ottomans. And in that particular fight, Miloš Obilić is one of the great heroes of that fight. So look at that, it's 1386-87. 1388, there's the Battle of Belica, where the Grand Duke Vlatko Vuković of Bosna, fighting for King Tvrtko, defeats once again a smaller army of Turks that had come up. And finally now we come to 1389. Now the lesson here is the Serbian people and that part of the world was constantly at war. So we talk about the Battle of Kosovo. It's not a single event, it's part of a series of events. Those poor people at that time were fighting constantly, either the Catholic Crusaders from the west, or they were fighting the Ottoman Muslims from the south and from the east. Now we come to 1389, the Battle of Kosovo. Map of Kosovo, we're talking about Kosovo Polje here, the field of blackbirds. I'm an old artillery captain in the Army, so we have what's called an order of battle. That's where you list all your troops, where they're from, whatever. We don't have a real detailed order of battle for either army. We have legends, we have some documents from the Ottomans. They had some documents. We have some documents from monks. And remember, not everybody could write back then. Most people were illiterate. And so the writing and the history writing was done in monasteries or by the scribes working for the kings, right? And so we have those documents, but many of them were secondhand. The monks weren't at the battle. They talked to people who were at the battle. The Ottoman Sultan scribes weren't at the battle. They interviewed people at the battle, sort of like secondhand reports. And so what we know is what was reported through these secondhand, and then there is folk knowledge. What our soldiers and others reported to their friends and families that went into folklore, which may be very exact and very true, but it can't be verified, I guess, unless you have multiple sources. So here it is. It's known that the Serbs had about with their allies, had about 25,000 men. Now, Lazar knew his own army. Remember how small his little portion was. He couldn't fight the Ottomans by himself. And so he called on the neighboring princes to to send their armies to join his and fight. And you could see, going back, who the neighboring princes were. Whoops, here we go. Okay, let me back up here. I went too far. So here he asked the neighboring princes, some of whom had already joined the Ottomans. Kraljević Marko is down here. Others joined right before the battle. And so there was, I think that Dejanović may have been one of them. And so he didn't even have all of the Serbians with him. But he had 25,000 men. I did a little research into medieval armies and the size of medieval armies, and the general literature is that full mobilization of fighting age men would be about 3% of the population. So if you do the arithmetic, if you've got 25,000 men, that means the entire population you're drawing from is less than 1 million people, 600,000 people. The Ottomans had 38,000 men, it is reported, by some sources, but they didn't pull up all of their people because this wasn't a last chance fight for them. This was an expansionary fight. They had other armies on other fronts that they later called up, as you will hear. And so that was about 1% of their population, which means they're coming from a population of about 3.8 million people. Okay? Kind of the similar situation to the Ukrainians and Russians today, population-wise. And so we had in the order, so we don't know exactly, there are reports, we know that Vukotić was there from Bosnia. We know that may have been some Christian Albanian princes there. There is on the internet some stories that some Croatian Maltese knights showed up, but the Maltese knights say that's not true. They didn't have any there. So you have to be very careful what you're reading about. A lot of people would like to say they were at the Battle of Kosovo, but they weren't. Vlatko Vukotić here was representing King Tvrtko, who stayed behind ostensibly because he was being attacked on his northern front and couldn't send his full army to Kosovo. So there is a legend in Serbs, or an admonition about zakasneo kao Tvrtko na Kosovo. Somebody as late as King Tvrtko was coming to Kosovo as a pejorative. You know, you're so damn late. You're late as Tvrtko was to Kosovo. You never showed up, and so there is that in the folk. Theory. So here we've got Lazar commanding the second, Vuk Branković commanding the right wing, and Vlatko Vuković the left wing, on which Miloš Obilić with his troops was part of that. On the other side, we had the Sultan Murad commanding the center, his son Bayazid commanding the right wing, his other son Jakub Čelebija commanding the left wing. We do know there were some Serbian contingents and other Christians in that army. What I used for my main source, a book by the late two of our late parishioners here, Alex Jognic and Slavko Todorović. They wrote a book way back called The Saga of Kosovo and the Focus on Serbian-American Relations, 1984. So that was one of my main texts. My other texts are there. So Dragnic is very explicit that Kraljević Marko, the great legendary Serbian prince, was not at the Battle of Kosovo, did not fight with the Ottomans against the Serbs. So he's very, very explicit there. Later, as you know, Bayazid eliminated his chief rival, his younger brother, to make sure that he didn't have any rivals for the throne. So that was the setup of the battle. The legendary night before the battle, Tsar Lazar holds a dinner. We know from reports, clearly there were scribes at the dinner. Many of the noblemen had their own scribes. They might have dictated what they heard at the dinner. So we have reports of at the dinner that Lazar himself the question was raised whether he would be betrayed and whether he would be betrayed by Miloš Obilić. And Obilić himself said no, the betrayer would be Vuk Branković. So that seed of that he would be betrayed and the Serbs would be betrayed is a long-standing seed in Serbian history, this notion of betrayal. very powerful, in the literature, powerful in the national songs. That we lost not only because of the bigger army, but we were betrayed. We were betrayed, and that feeling of betrayal is very powerful in the literature. Once again, this is from the oral tradition of what was said by Lazar to his army. Whether he actually said it in these words, we don't know. We know that somebody attributed these words to him, probably very much like Henry at Agincourt. There were certainly scribes, monks listening, watching, maybe writing what was said. We just don't know. But apparently the speech he gives, that he understands that we may be martyrs, we're facing a larger enemy. It is better to give ourselves to Christ than to surrender to the Ottomans. And all of these slides are available to you. I've got my card here. Just email me, I'll send them to you. So if you're not reading this quickly, the Serbian or the English, it's okay. You can take a look at it later. I just wanted to point out what was there. And of course, the soldiers, there's a soldier's reply. How an army replies, I don't know. Did some sergeant step forward? Did a captain step forward? Or was this the sort of tacit agreement that this is the way they would have replied if somebody had gotten up and spoken? We just don't know at this point in time. But you see, they're saying, we're ready to die for our faith. Let us not spare ourselves. Let us sacrifice ourselves to God, not as formally by catering to our pleasure, by feasting, but by blood and heroic deeds. So the sense is set that, at least from this literature, the Serbs are feeling the doom of the battle. They're facing a much larger foe, and they're worried about betrayal. The way the armies were set up is in one of the military publications I get sort of had it set up. They're calling the Allied Army. They've got King Tvrtko here. He wasn't there. This is Vlatko Vukotic, Lazar in the middle, Vuk Brankovic. We have here the Ottoman army as it was set up under Bayazid, Murad in the middle, and I don't, even as an old artillery officer, I don't make a lot of sense out of these drawings, but apparently people went back and forth. And there are purported to be reports on how the battle went step by step. Once again, this could have been from survivors on one side or the other. Some of the paintings of that depiction, once again, some of these are a bit fantastic. The uniforms are wrong. They're from the wrong period. These are 19th century artists trying to demonstrate. But here, what's the point here? We, the Serbs, are fighting for Christ. We're fighting for Christianity. That's the message there. A different painting, once again, showing the various, the Turks and the Serbs. This, once again, is another, don't know if this is a Christian painting. I'm saying it, I'm not sure because there aren't too many crosses. There are few Christian symbols here. So this might be a painting from the West rather than from Serbia. And of course, this is a graph from the Ottomans, their own depiction of what happened at the battle here. We've got a dragon of some sorts, and I'm not sure which side here. Oh, here are the Christians here. There's the cross, and here are the Ottomans here in that particular battle. For the young people, just you're wondering, what did the soldiers and knights look like? This is from one of my books on military uniforms called the Armies of the Ottoman Turks in area and Hungary in the fall of Eastern Europe. So these are pretty well documented and authenticated, and you'll find these are done either from frescoes. So people looked at the frescoes of the knights and said, okay, what did that early 14th, 15th century fresco artist, what did he put them in? And also there are museum exhibits where some of the uniforms were obviously saved over the years, particularly of the nobility. Those uniforms would have been saved. But here you've got what a Serbian infantryman might have looked like, carrying, interestingly, a mace rather than a sword. As you know, Kraljević Marko preferred a mace. That was his weapon. This is, Charles Topia was a Christian Albanian lord, and this is some Bulgarian here, so just the way they chose it. Similar from one of the other books, a Frankish knight. Now these would have been the Crusaders with their very explicit heraldry. Byzantine Palace Guard, which would be the Varangian Guard. Now, the Varangian Guard were Vikings or Saxons who protected the Byzantine Emperor. Keep in mind, Tsar Dushan himself, his personal bodyguard was all Germans. They all had to be over 6'5", and they had a legendary captain that was with him, and so he was very concerned about being assassinated by other Serbs, and so his personal bodyguard was 50 hand-chosen, well-paid German mercenaries. At that time, even the Serbian army had paid mercenaries from Spain, it is claimed, paid mercenaries from Venice. You could hire what were called ballistieri. Does anybody have a friend named Ballistieri? A ballistra is a crossbow, and it pierces armor. So if you had a company of ballistieri, there were these traveling companies. So even at the Battle of Kosovo, both the Turks and the Serbs would have had some contingents of paid mercenaries to fight with them. So here we have Serbian heavy infantry, what they would have looked like right there, the helmet, this one a sword, this of course is an archer. This is right before the introduction of gunpowder. So we don't yet have cannons developed, we don't yet have muskets, so we're still relying on swords, cavalry, spears, etc. The knight Miloš Obilić, it is reported both by the Turkish chronicles and by the Western chronicles that a Serbian knight did assassinate the Ottoman Emperor Sultan Murad. That is reported. It is reported that his name was Miloš Obilić. Others report it as Kobilić. Kobila being a mare, a horse mare, and his coat of arms was 3 horses' heads. It is said that the early Serbs didn't like the fact that their hero was named after a horse, and so the name morphed from Kobilić to Obilić. I don't know if that's true or not, but you'll find that in the literature. There is some speculation as to what his name was. Nothing much known about him. It is speculated that he was a son-in-law, one of the son-in-laws of Knez Lazar. The other son-in-law was Vuk Branković, but it's not clear that he was. There is no attribution to what his wife's name was, so she's not mentioned in any genealogy as having married an Obilić or a Kobilić, and so that's still it's still vague. It's still somewhere in history, but he is frequently depicted. He is frequently shown with a dragon's head on the top of his helmet. Here he is turning himself in along with a couple of compatriots. He did not go alone to assassinate the two other depictions of Miloš Obilić. This one on the medal given by the Kingdom of Serbia, the Kingdom of Montenegro, and the Kingdom of Yugoslavia all gave the Miloš Obilić Medal for Bravery. It was the highest medal for bravery, specifically for bravery. It wasn't the highest decoration. You get an Order of Karađorđe, you could get higher decorations, but this was specifically the medal for bravery, and it came in gold or bronze. And you can see here a couple of things. Number one, he's depicted as relatively elderly, right? I mean, this is not a young knight here. And once again, there is the dragon. Here we have from one of the churches, Miloš depicted as a much younger man. From fantasy, from legend, did he really look that way? Did this artist talk to somebody who knew him? All of these are things that are not known in history. There was a, did I bring it with me? There was a Serbian Janissary, a young man from Serbian provinces who was taken. His name was Konstantin. He was taken as a young boy into the service, worked his way up through the Janitsary, and then later wrote an autobiography, which is available through Amazon. It's translated into English. And he actually participated in the siege of Vienna. I don't believe he participated in the Battle of Kosovo, but he talked to people who did and then wrote it up. And he has this scene that he writes where Lazar is brought before, is captured, is brought before the Sultan, and along with Duke Kraimir of Toplica. And he's brought between, his head is to be cut off, but Kraimir prays to the Sultan that the king's head not touch the ground, that he catch the king's head, and then he gives up his own head. But that the king's head would not touch the ground. He would stand and catch it, and then he would give his own life. So you have this exchange here, which you can read later at your pleasure. The Duke said, I have sworn today to the Lord God that where the head of Prince Lazar shall be, there shall be mine. And both heads fell to the ground. At the same time, a Janissary brought in the head of Miloš Obilić and threw it before the Sultan's feet, saying, Here, O Sultan, are the heads of your two fiercest enemies. So History Magazine today it says the Battle of Kosovo, it says was a physical defeat against the Ottoman Turks, but a moral victory that formed the backbone of the Serbian national identity. The war between the Christian and Muslim had by 1350 taken on a different pattern. The main bulwark against the Ottoman invasion of Europe was the Serbian Empire, an Orthodox power that derived its religion and its culture largely from Byzantium with some influences from Western Europe. From a similar book, although the Serbs had lost the battle, their rulers and many of their leaders from the time seem to have been so dazed by the death of their own sultan and his sons that they hardly claimed the victory. Bayazid withdrew to Yedrin, presumably to confirm his claim to the throne. He actually killed his brother before he did that. And a Russian traveling to Byzantium found the whole region in disorder. In the West, Kosovo was first celebrated as a victory of the Serbs over the infidel. There was a great rejoicing in Florence, and a Te Deum, which is a mass of commemoration, was sung in Paris at Notre Dame. Probably this mistake rose from a letter sent by the powerful Bosnian King Tvrtko, who, remember, didn't show up, and to other cities in Dalmatia and Italy. In it, he announced that he had defeated the Turks at Kosovo. Doubtless Tvrtko wished to impress the Dalmatian cities whom he hoped to bring under his sovereignty, but he may also generally have believed through Vlatko Vukovic that such heavy casualties to the Turks could not have been won in a clear victory. That is a true statement. So both kings were killed, both armies withdrew who survived from the field. So after the Battle of Kosovo, the Turks did not go marching up into Serbia, occupying towns and villages. They withdrew. They had heavy losses. They had 38,000 men. It's not known how many they lost, but they lost plenty because they were up against a seasoned Serbian army that a couple years earlier had defeated a Turkish army. So they were not up against villagers with pitchforks and garden skates. They were up against tough soldiers who had been in battle before and stood their ground. And so the battle itself, at best, was a draw. The problem was, if the two sides had the same losses, 25,000 losses out of 365,000 citizens was a much greater pain than 25,000 losses out of 3.8 million citizens. That was the main difference. The Turks could go back to their large population and raise and bring another army, which they did. After the battle, the Turks profited from the battle. It did not represent the decisive moment where Serbia came under their rule, but rather a diminishment of Serbian power. A period of consolidation followed. In the 1390s, Bayazid cleaned up pockets of resistance in Macedonia, Bulgaria, and eastern Hungary. The Serbian kingdom survived in various forms for nearly 70 years after Kosovo. Immediately after the battle, it was ruled by Lazar's widow Milica and her son Stefan Lazarovich. Milica gave her daughter Olivera to the Ottoman emperor to be his wife. Now later, you'll see, if any of you watched any of the Netflix series that the Turks are producing, Netflix has a number of historic Ottoman epics, 6, 8, 10 series. One of them is about Vlad Dracul. The other one is about the fall of Vienna. In both of those, there are Serbian princesses in the harem. The main princess is Princess Maria Brankovic, who is the stepmother of Murad II, and she is a liaison between her father, King Juraj Brankovic, still a despot king, and the Ottomans. And so the Serbian women played an important role. In the fall of Constantinople, in the final fall of Constantinople, both the mother of the Sultan and the mother of the Byzantine emperor were Serbian. So both men had Serbian mothers. In the case of the Byzantine emperor, his mother was a Dragaš from the Dragaš dynasty, and he preferred the surname Dragaš actually to his own Greek surname. So we had this ironic thing where in the battle of, in the fall of Constantinople, we have both kings have Serbian mothers. Reprisals against the Serbs continued, and we had we'll talk about that in a moment. There is a famous curse that comes out of this battle. This is a curse. I don't think any particular king wrote this curse. I think this is something created by the Serbian people, by the folk poets, saying, you know, the king called for people to come to the battle. Some didn't show up. And here's the curse in English. Whosoever the Serb and Serbian born, Serbian his blood and his lineage, who comes not to fight at Kosovo, by his own hand he shall bring forth nothing, neither gold and wine nor fine white wheat. There shall be no harvest from his lands, nor in his house children of his blood. While his race lives, they shall waste away. So that's the curse to those that didn't show up and answer the call for the Battle of Kosovo. After the Battle of Kosovo, the remaining Christian kings in the region founded the Order of the Dragon, was founded by Sigismund of Luxembourg, who at that time was head of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and his first number one knight was Knez Stefan Lazarević, son of Knez Lazar of Kosovo. So we have now, after the Battle of Kosovo, what happens? We have a Battle of Nicopolis, which the Ottomans win. We have a battle for the city of Niš, a very important city, a hometown, a birthplace of a number of Roman emperors, which is won by the Hungarian John Hunyadi and the troops of Juraj Brankovic still remaining. The Battle of Varna, the Christians lose. The second Battle of Kosovo, where the Hungarian army is led by John Hunyadi, is a loss for the Christians. In 1453, we have the fall of Constantinople. In 1459, the last large Serbian fortress, Smederevo, is attacked and falls to the Ottomans. 1461, the Ottomans clean up what's left in Asia Minor. In 1456, there is a siege of Belgrade, but the Hungarians, once again with Juraj Brankovic, defeat the Ottoman army temporarily. At the Second Battle of Kosovo, we had in 1848, John Hunyadi was defeated. After that, pretty much there was not much left. Hunyadi was captured by the despot Juraj Brankovic in retaliation for damage his troops had perpetrated on Serbia. He was released against a ransom of 100,000 florins, the return of the domains that Hunyadi had revocated from Brankovic, and also Brankovic worked out an engagement. So the Brankovic dynasty remained. Number one, they were further away from the Ottomans, Number two, they did some skillful negotiation. Whether or not Vuk Branković abandoned the Serbian army at the Battle of Kosovo is not factually anywhere documented. It appears in literature. It appears in the Narodna Pesna that Branković was the izdajnik, that he left, but there is no real documentation that he willfully pulled his troops out of the battle. He may have survived, he certainly survived the battle, but that does not say that he withdrew his troop at some critical time, allowing the Ottomans to win. But it's in the folk legend that Vuk Branković was the character. Possibly because he was the only, of the leading princes, he was the only survivor. By the way, Đurađ Branković was later considered one of the wealthiest men in Europe because Serbia had alluvial gold and silver mines. And so his last descendant died in the 1800s, and of course one of his descendants was Saint Sava II Branković, Serbian saint in the 16th century. The arms of Hrebeljanović and Branković look like this. Once again, the double eagle. This time, the Branković has actually had horns. So if it was Branković's alone, you'd only have these two horns, but it's Lazar's family with the double eagle, and so you've got the combined arms there. These were the last Serbian princesses and princes who could muster an army. The last Serbs that could muster an army in 1459. They did so at the Battle of Smederevo. Was the despot Halina Paleologi, that's the Greek surname, Stefan Branković, and then Stefan Tomasević, another despot. And so these were three Serbian principalities that in 1459 could raise an army, but they lost. After that, no Serbian state could exist. The last remaining Serbian nobles fled to properties in Hungary, Romania, Wallachia, and other places. After the loss of the Battle of Kosovo, this is a slide from my presentation to you about the history of Krajina, right? How did the Serbs get to Krajina? Well, they were part of this migration that occurred after the fall of Kosovo in the 1500s. You've got the Serb Uskoks going into Lika about 1590 or so, establishing the military frontier. And then during the next couple hundred years, the Ottoman Christian border would swing back and forth. The Ottoman Christian border, which you're probably familiar with. There was the issue of religious independence. Some of the Serbian noblemen and some of the Serbian people thought it'd be better to live under the Turks, which allowed you to keep your Orthodox religion, than to go under the Hungarians, who would want to make you uniate and then make you Roman Catholic. And so some said, we're better off under the Ottomans, where they'll let us keep our Orthodox religion. I won't be the king of the country, but the people will have their Orthodox religion. And so there was a difference of opinion among people on that as well. After the fall of Kosovo, the Serbian Empire was divided. Some went into the Ottoman Empire, some went under the Republic of Venice, and the rest under the Kingdom of Hungary, but no Serbia would emerge for another couple hundred years. All of this is chronicled, and many additional stories, in the cycle of epic poetry by the Serbs, given by the Guslars. It is all translated into English. It's been translated from the early 1800s. Goethe translated it into German in the 17th, 18th century. Englishmen translated it. I've got a book there from 1864 by Lord Bulwer Lytton, who was a young member of the British Embassy in Constantinople in the 1830s. He heard about the Serbian epic poems while he was in Constantinople, read them in German, learned Serbo-Croatian, and translated them into English. And I have his 1864 book there on my shelf. So you have here the Heavenly Kingdom once again. This is an icon of the battle. Some of the legendary figures still talked about. I have a couple of books there on King's son Marco, who once again did not show up at was not with the Turks at the Battle of Kosovo, and his best friend Strahinja Banović, the Duke's son Strahinja, here with a famous villa up in the corner. This is his famous horse, and he should have a mace here somewhere. I forget, his horse was Piebald, Sharac, I think it was called. Somebody may correct me on that. The Kosovo cycle, all the different songs, the heroes, the women, the servant Milutin are all part of the Kosovo Maiden. The death of the Jugovic is all part of the story. This is, of course, the Maiden of Serbia, famous 19th century painting. In 1999, a book came out in which it said that we are reprinting this because of its intrinsic merits and because the recent crisis in Kosovo itself compels the entire world to understand the nature of the ancient conflicts and the passions that fuel it. Charles Simic wrote about it in, once again, the importance of the Battle of Kosovo. I won't bore you with this now. I've gone long enough. You can read this on your own. He talks about the mystification of the story and how it remains in the folk legend. I like this little explanation in which it says, well, what Serbs remained got up from the plain and counted each other and called out, but nobody got any answers. No one came to help them. And so the Turkish power passed the border of the first dimension. After a while, there remained almost nothing at all, dust and ashes, vain repentance, late remorse, and the heavy blackness of total defeat. The Serbs quieted down, but they did not shut their mouths. Idled by the time, with time on their hands, they started to sing and sang themselves hoarse in endless poems accompanied by the mourning sounds of the sobbing gusla. The blind guslars gazed into the future, and those who could see covered themselves out of shame and became the leaders of the blind. But what kind of music is this, my poor soul, reduced to just one string? The Kosovo legend gave the Serbs hope that they could fight again and win their freedom. It had been a physical defeat, but a moral victory, a triumph of good over evil. In this way, history was translated into myth and then became history again. In the 19th and 20th century, wars waged within the lands which, after 1918 and the recovery of Kosovo into the kingdom, was united as the South Slav kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes. I would like to read from one passage from the Kosovo poem that was, so this was originally written in Serbian, and this is Lord Bulwer Lytton, an Englishman, translating it, I've got to be where there's a light here, translating it into English to give an Englishman not a direct translation, but a feeling for what the Serbs are saying. And this is what the Serbians said after the Battle of Kosovo. There resteth to Serbia a glory that shall not grow old. There remaineth to Serbia a story, a tale to be shouted and told. They are gone to their graves grim and gory, the beautiful, brave, and bold. But out of this darkness and desolation, of the mourning heart of a widowed nation, their memory waketh in exaltation. Yea, so long as a babe shall be born, or there rested a man in the land, so long as the blade of corn shall be reaped by human hand, so long as the grass shall grow. On this mighty plain of Kosovo, so long even so shall the glory of those remain who this day on battle were slain. Thank you. I've got time for just a few questions if anybody has any or has a comment. I know many of you know this from your own reading and your own history, but if anybody has questions, any? Yeah, take a microphone, please.
Well, I did do some studies on Ottoman history and Byzantine history. maybe, I don't know if this is working. But in my studies, which are admittedly here in the United States, I learned that the church, the Serbian Orthodox Church, was key in perpetuating the story of the Battle of Kosovo. While the Serbs were under Ottoman rule, they didn't have education except for the church, the monks. So this was very, very important, is that were it not for the Serbian Orthodox Church hierarchy and monks, maybe that that glorious battle would have been forgotten and the history around it, and perhaps the people of Serbia would have been assimilated into the Ottoman Empire. So I wondered if you could comment on that.
Not being an expert on church history, I will tell you, as I mentioned earlier, that literacy was rare, and it was in the monks who learned to read and write and wrote things down. And so I think a combination of church theology and also the fact that they kept the written records, were able to write down things, probably played an important role in it. But certainly the church was there to support the people, remind them that remember the whole story of Kosovo, we were a great nation. We were a great nation, we can be so again. That is the story of Kosovo. Anyone else? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.